Volume 1. Chapter 1, The Trash. Chapter 1, The Trash. The Mu Manor. The sunset shone into the back-end courtyard and the leaves reflected it in faint gleams. Evenings here were so tranquil that it seemed like only the soft rustling of leaves in the wind could be heard. Your Highness, do you really think that our current actions are appropriate? After all, you still have an engagement with my elder sister. The young girl flushed and raised her head shyly as she leaned her delicate, alabaster-like body into the man's well-built chest. If our relationship were to be discovered by elder sister. Are you referring to that useless piece of trash? The man frowned, an action which marred his handsome appearance, a trace of disdain in his response to the girl's words. When we are together, you mustn't mention that repulsive girl to me. As for the engagement, it means nothing to me. I will rescind it someday. How can trash like her be my wife? Ting Er, trust me, I will give you a legitimate identity. Only you can be matched with me. Your Highness, Mu Ting Er was moved, but she replied again with difficulty, won't this still be too unfair to elder sister? She's still my elder sister after all. Hearing her words, the man tightened his arms around her as he said tenderly, Ting Er, you're too kind. It's her fortune to have you as her sister. If she still doesn't recognize your kind intentions, don't blame me for being ruthless. Mu Ting Er had tears in the corners of her eyes as she lowered her head into his chest, but at the same time her lips unconsciously curled up into a sneer. Her scheme had succeeded. At this moment, they heard a shriek. Ah! You too, you too. Ru Yue tightly covered her mouth as she gazed with disbelief at the adultery in front of her. The couple had been caught completely naked. Tears flowed uncontrollably. At this moment, her heart seemed to have been viciously pierced. The man frowned, and used a piece of the clothing at his side to cover their bodies. He looked at Ru Yue with a frown, expressing undisguised frustration and disgust. I've told you long ago to stay out of my sight. Now, you have actually disturbed Ting Er and I. If it wasn't for you being a daughter of the Mu family, you wouldn't live to see another day. Seeing the man protecting Mu Ting Er in his embrace, Ru Yue bit hard on her lips, her eyes bloodshot and filled with tears born of grievance. His words were like a sharp blade that ruthlessly pierced her heart, making her feel that she was in so much pain that she did not want to continue living. So, in his heart, I'm only an insignificant person. Then why did he treat me with tenderness when I was less than 5 years old? If it hadn't been for that tenderness, I wouldn't have been attracted to him, unable to stay away. However, after being tested for her innate ability when she was 5, she had discovered that all her muscles and meridians were blocked, making her a trash that couldn't cultivate. All of his tenderness had left her then. Shut up! The sudden cry gave Ru Yue a fright. She didn't know what she had said wrong, so she looked back at him with feelings of hurt. His face had turned ashen. Yi Tianfeng looked with disdain upon the young teary-faced girl before him and sneered, Ru Yue, what do you have that can be compared to Ting Er? You don't even deserve to be compared to her shoes. Your Highness, Mu Ting Er hastily held back Yi Tianfeng. Your Highness, please stop. It is my fault. I shouldn't have agreed with your Highness. Ting Er has always thought that our love would be blessed by everyone, but I have forgotten that elder sister is deeply in love with you. Your Highness, I beg for you to stop hurting elder sister. She is a good girl. The single teardrop that flowed down the tender curve of her lovely face made Yi Tianfeng's heart ache. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2, They are a family instead. Chapter 2, They are a family instead. Ting Er. Tightly holding her hand, he said with deep emotion, when you gave yourself to me a month ago, I swore that I would definitely marry you. However, the engagement between this trash and I was an imperial order by my royal grandfather. I'll need some time to convince him to withdraw the order, but believe in me, you'll become my wife soon. The scene playing out before Ru Yue's eyes hurt her deeply. She glared with bloodshot eyes filled with hatred at Mu Ting Er, and said, "Mu Ting Er, you're only an adopted daughter, while I'm the genuine young mistress. I hope you clearly know your status." Pa! Just when she said that, a slap viciously landed on her face. Ru Yue's body suddenly trembled as she held onto the red mark on the side of her face, then stiffly turned her head. She looked in disbelief at the middle-aged man at her side. "Father, how could you? Impudent! Who allowed you to talk to Ting Er in such a manner?" The middle-aged man had a cold expression and was acting as though the person before him wasn't his own daughter, but merely a maid that he could abuse. "Father, I'm your daughter," said Ru Yue, her voice choked with emotion. With tears in her eyes, she continued, "She's only an adopted girl." "Father, why did you?" "Daughter?" The middle-aged man snorted. "A daughter like you is my lifetime's disgrace. Even though Ting Er was adopted, her innate talent is outstanding. She's my pride instead. You really think that you have the right to be paired up with Crown Prince Jing-1? I'll clearly tell you now that I have assisted them in this matter. Why else do you think no one has come here yet?" It was as though lightning had struck in a clear sky. Ru Yue trembled a little, biting on her lips as she looked at her blood relative. "Elder sister Ting Er, are you all right?" At this moment, Mu Ting, who shared the same parents as Ru Yue, passed by her blood sister as if she did not see her, walked straight to Mu Ting Er's side, whose face was already covered in tears. "Elder sister Ting Er, rest assured. Shui Er and father will protect you. We won't let that person steal your husband." Mu Ting laughed adorably before shifting her gaze to Ru Yue. With disgust in her gaze, she continued, "Moreover, in the Mu family, I only have Mu Ting Er as my elder sister. This trash doesn't deserve to be my elder sister. I really don't understand how mother gave birth to such trash. She isn't worthy to be the Mu family's daughter. Father, Shui Er." Mu Ting Er looked gratefully at the two. Nobody noticed the sneer on her lips at that moment. "Ru Yue, I swore long ago that I would seize all of your possessions. Blame it on yourself for being the genuine young mistress of the house, while I'm just an adopted girl. The main reason why a girl that you always look down upon, is able to climb onto your head today was mainly due to you being trash that cannot cultivate. But it should be impossible for you to suspect the reason you became trash. When you were 5, before your innate talent test, I placed poison into your meal. Furthermore, nobody could possibly suspect that the 4-year-old me would have been such a schemer." Ru Yue's heart turned cold as she looked at the harmonious family. She suddenly realized that she was just an outsider. "Ha ha!" She suddenly howled with laughter as she viciously charged towards a tree at the side, still laughing. Her sudden action shocked the others. Mu Ting Er's expression changed greatly, as she didn't expect that she had forced her stepsister to her death. How boring it would be if she were to die now. When she wanted to stop her sister, a middle-aged man raised his arm to block her path. "Since she wants to die, let her be. It will be as if I never had her as a daughter." 1. It is Yi Tianfeng's title. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3, The Spirit from Huaxia. Chapter 3, The Spirit from Huaxia. Bang! When Ru Yue's head struck the tree, blood immediately flowed down her head, but her lips expressed a smile of relief. Finally, I don't need to stay here and listen to their heart-rending words. She gradually closed her eyes, with a glistening teardrop hanging in the corner of her eyes. "Let's go." With an unfeeling glance, the middle-aged man looked at the young girl lying in a pool of blood. His cold expression made it seem as though it had just been a stranger in front of him. Yi Tianfeng shuddered slightly, thinking that it was truly heartless for a father to make such a move. However, who had told Ru Yue to be a trash? In comparison to a gifted person like Ting Er, that girl had been destined to not even have the right of acting as her sister's stepping stone. At this moment, the young girl, who had initially been lifeless, suddenly opened her eyes and stood up. In that instant, her icy gaze landed on the group of people who were already turning to leave. She remembered being at Long White Mountain and being ambushed by the Gu family. In order to protect an ancient alchemist book, she had met her demise along with her enemies. After that, she felt as though she was carried away by the wind. Where is this? Suddenly, memories that didn't belong to her fiercely came rushing to her mind, making her feel a pain so great that it felt as though her head was being ripped apart. She held her head tightly in her hands, knitting her bloody eyebrows. Martial God Continent? Wasn't I in Huaxia? What kind of place is the Martial God Continent? However, from the memories, she knew that this place honored martial skills. The training techniques here were the same as in Huaxia, using the dantian to store energy, and medicine for assistance. The grading system for the skills was also the same. She had possessed a person who had the same surname and name as herself, but who was a trash with cramped muscles and blocked meridians, and had died after being unable to withstand a great shock. In Huaxia, Ru Yue had also been a martial practitioner. For an ancient martial practitioner, nothing was impossible, so after being shocked for a short moment, she quickly accepted reality. She had reincarnated. That too in such a trash's body, no less. Elder sister, you're still alive? Mu Ting Er's body shuddered, showing happiness on her delicate face. That's great. I thought you. A cold gaze shot at the seemingly happy young girl. Ru Yue replied, do you have any business with me? If not, move out of the way. Mu Ting Er pouted gently, and tears of grievance swam in her eyes. I was only worried for elder sister. If I did something wrong, I hope that I didn't anger elder sister. Her appearance looked so pitiful. She looked like a small pure white flower that attracted tender affection. The middle-aged man's expression darkened. Ru Yue, is this the attitude you should have towards your sister? It was a waste for Ting Er to be worried for you. You aren't worthy of her feelings. Sister? Ru Yue laughed grimly. I don't remember mother giving birth to such a sister. Mu Ting Er's expression changed slightly. It was the most painful thing in her life to be only an adopted daughter of the Mu family, and not be a genuine young mistress. If it hadn't been for her father's incurable illness and if it hadn't been for his sacrifice to save the Mu family's old madam, in order to ensure a safe haven for his daughter, it would be impossible for her filial stepfather to adopt the helpless Ting Er. From that moment on, she swore that she would behave as if she were rightfully above people and that she would receive the same treatment as a genuine young mistress in the Mu family. However, that wretched Ru Yue had always used this fact to stab her every single time. Just what is so good about her? Other than having the bloodline of the Mu family, she's just a good-for-nothing young miss. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 4, Plans. Chapter 4, Plans. Impudent. The middle-aged man tightly clenched his fists with the veins on his temples bulging. He was staring with a gaze one would show only to an absolutely irreconcilable enemy. Ting Er is my daughter. How do you dare to humiliate her in such a fashion? It seemed that in his heart, only Mu Ting Er and Mu Yue were his daughters. Meanwhile, Ru Yue was but an illegitimate child who was verbally insulting his precious daughter. Father, let's leave it as it is, said Mu Ting Er as she held onto the middle-aged man's arm, biting her lips and shaking her head. I am aware that I'm only an adopted daughter in the Mu family. I don't wish for anything other than father's love ever since I've lost my blood father when I was young. The middle-aged man let out a great sigh. Ting Er, when your father died after saving my mother, I swore then that I would treat you as my biological daughter. How could I let anyone hurt you? He had said these whilst glaring at Ru Yue with a dark expression. It was obvious that the person he was referring to was Ru Yue. "Father, the Crown Prince is still here," Mu Ting Er whispered with her head lowered. Same as before, no one noticed her sneers. The way she acted was definitely not in order to seek for forgiveness from Ru Yue. It was due to His Highness liking girls who were compassionate. It was because of this that he had fallen in love with her. He. "Your Highness, I've earned your ridicule," the middle-aged man apologized, cupping his fist, then shifted his gaze back to Ru Yue. With a frown, he said, coolly, "Why are you still standing there? Quickly scram! In the future, if you dare loiter around and interrupt His Highness and Ting Er's time together again, I'll break your legs." A cold glimmer flashed in Ru Yue's eyes. But since she had just come to this continent, she decided to spend some time digesting information first, so she quietly headed back to her quarters in her memories, but only after tossing a bone-chilling gaze at her father, Mu Ting. Mu Ting was startled. His daughter actually possessed that type of gaze? He didn't think much of it, turning to face Yi Tian Feng. "Your Highness, Ting Er is an unmarried girl, but has given her innocence to you. I don't know when His Highness will annul the engagement with that trash and marry Ting Er." Yi Tianfeng's sword-like brows frowned before replying after a short moment, "Mu family's master. Ting Er will definitely be the main wife one for me, the Crown Prince. I currently can't tell my royal grandfather that I've already had close physical relationship with Ting Er. Otherwise, knowing my royal grandfather, he would just give Ting Er a concubine status for committing such an act before marriage. In that case, I would feel that I've wronged Ting Er for giving her merely the status of a concubine. His Ting Er was so beautiful and outstanding. Only she could be worthy to have his main wife's status. In that case, what are your Highness' plans? In a couple of months, there'll be a great martial tournament in the royal city. Ting Er is currently a third martial stage practitioner. There won't be a lot of young competitors who can defeat her. If she turns out victorious, royal grandfather will have a whole new level of respect for her. At that moment, I'll introduce her to my martial master. My royal grandfather can't neglect my master's words, as he is an alchemist." Alchemist. Mu Ting's breath tightened, with his eyes lit up. Since rare things were precious, due to their scarcity, alchemists held high status throughout the continent. If someone were to befriend an alchemist, they wouldn't need to dwell on how to obtain medicinal pills in the future. "Your Highness, don't worry. Ting Er will definitely be victorious during that great martial tournament." He. "As you've mentioned, the number of talents who could outperform Ting Er in this royal city is really negligible." Mu Ting smiled. He held great confidence in the precious daughter he had raised for nearly 10 years. 1. There is a difference between main wife and concubine. The main wife holds greater powers over concubines. E.g. differences between the empress and the concubines. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 5, Martial God Continent. Chapter 5, Martial God Continent. In one of the rooms in the living quarters on the western side of the manor, a young girl was hugging her head as she lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She was taking this time to organize the memories that didn't belong to her. In this martial god continent, energy cultivation was the main form of cultivation. Those who practiced it were referred to as martial practitioners. The grades for the continent's martial practitioners were simple. Starting with the Hotian realm, made up of 1st to 9th stage martial practitioners, it went on to the Xiantian realm, for those who advanced from the 9 martial stages of the Hotian realm. Xiantian experts could proclaim themselves as monarchs. It was also impossible for a Xiantian expert to appear within the royal clan, since the 9 martial stages of the Hotian realm represented their limits. Thus, when a Xiantian expert emerged, they would be treated as important guests in all countries. Excluding the martial practitioner profession, another profession was to become an alchemist. The requirements for being an alchemist were extremely strict. One had to possess not only the fire element, superior mental strength was needed as well. Only the martial practitioners who had both would be considered to have the innate gift and talent to become alchemists. However, in this continent that honored martial strength, the body that she possessed was of a trash, as her meridians were blocked, which meant that she was not even a first martial stage practitioner yet. This also proved that she didn't have any status in the Mu family. My meridians are blocked? Ru Yue leapt out of bed and sat cross-legged. Her finger gently pressed on her pulse, as her expression gradually darkened. It seems that this body wasn't naturally trash. It became this way because it was poisoned. The poison has spread into the meridians, clogging up the energy flowing in my body, thus making it impossible for me to cultivate. However, in Huaxia, she had been the successor to an aristocratic medicinal family, so this poison wasn't hard for her to deal with. If I had silver needles on hand, I would be completely confident in detoxifying my body. But now, I can only make use of the sewing needles I have on hand. It will be much riskier to use sewing needles. If I make a mistake, not only will I fail, cross-contamination might also occur. Moreover, sewing needles are shorter, so if I were to be careless, the needle would get stuck in my body. However, she currently didn't have any other alternative. If she were to go to a weapon store to manufacture a silver needle, she would need a lot of silver coins. Currently, she was so poor that she did not have even a single copper. It was unimaginable that the genuine young mistress of the family suffered such treatment. Fortunately enough, she was an unwed girl, so there were a lot of sewing needles close at hand. The first step in acupuncture and moxibustion is detoxification. With a few 5-centimeter-long sewing needles in her hand, Ru Yue lit a candle and placed the tips of the needles above the flame. After a short moment, when all the needles were red hot, she then placed them in clean water. This place is not as developed as Huaxia. There isn't any alcohol, nor are there any disinfectants, so I can only use the most primitive method of disinfection. But it's more than enough. Now for the detoxification. Ru Yue sat cross-legged once again, using 2 of her fingers to press several acupuncture points before slowly piercing them with the sewing needles. Time went by slowly. During that period of time, it was extremely difficult for Ru Yue. The bitter pain from her body's detoxification made her knit her eyebrows and her lips tremble faintly, while her lovable face showed a deathly white complexion. In the evening, the young girl in the bath suddenly opened her sharp eyes. There was a willful smile on her lips and a flickering glimmer in her cold eyes. The poison has finally been eliminated. At this moment, she felt unexpectedly relaxed. Feelings from her previous life flared in her heart again. Her smiling expression intensified, but her gaze was still bone-piercingly cold. I'm not the Ru Yue from this continent, but I'm now living in her stead. Thus, I'll slowly help her pay back her unwillingness and anger to those people. But if you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 6, The Book of Alchemy, a Dream Treasure for Alchemists. Chapter 6, The Book of Alchemy, a Dream Treasure for Alchemists. In the study, Tian Feng looked at the bright yellow-clothed figure flipping through memorials on the imperial throne. He wasn't anxious, but simply stood quietly at the side. After a short moment, the emperor of the Ziyu kingdom placed down his memorials and raised his head to look at the handsome youth below the platform. Feng Er, do you have some matters that need our one attention? Tian Feng smiled, radiating with confidence. Royal grandfather, your grandson has come forth regarding the marriage to Ru Yue. We know your thoughts. Emperor of Ziyu frowned and said with a strict look, however, the words we say are gold and jade, so how can we withdraw the imperial order that we personally decreed? Raising his eyebrows, a glimmer flashed in Tian Feng's deep eyes. Royal grandfather, there will be a tournament soon. Your grandson's master will personally attend it. At that moment, your grandson would ask a heaven pill on behalf of royal grandfather. Royal grandfather may have the possibility of becoming a 7th martial stage practitioner then. The Emperor of Ziyu's heart leapt and he immediately became excited. Who knew how many years he had stagnated at the 6th martial stage? It would be impossible for him to make a breakthrough without external help. Only an idiot would pass on such a good opportunity. Cough. Cough. The Emperor of Ziyu suppressed his heartfelt happiness and smiled. In that case, we will help the Mu family's Mu Ru Yue find another husband so that we can account to the Mu family, preventing them from losing too much face. Fomere, bring Mu Ru Yue to meet us in a few days. Yes, royal grandfather. Yi Tianfeng respectfully lowered his head, a smile of complacency displayed on his lips. In the rear courtyard of the Mu family, a young girl gradually opened her eyes. With a brandish of her hand, a book appeared in her palm. The book looked extremely ordinary, only the gold words on the simple and unadorned bronze cover giving away its uniqueness. The Book of Alchemy. Mu Ru Yue tightly held onto the book with a complex glimmer in her eyes. The Book of Alchemy was an item that her grandfather from her previous life had passed down to her. Every cultivator would seek this book as their dream treasure. Her grandfather had left the sect due to this book in order to establish a medicinal aristocratic family in the world. Finally, she had been ambushed by the Gu family because of it, resulting in the loss of her life at the Long White Mountain. It was unexpected that she had reincarnated in a large continent similar to Huaxia. I don't know what are the uses of this item that grandfather has given me. Even though this book of alchemy is good, it will just be a burden if it can't be opened. Mu Ru Yue knew a fitting proverb better than anyone, namely, an ignorant person isn't guilty, but treasuring a jade ring is a crime. 2 foot. At this moment, the Book of Alchemy suddenly emitted a bronze ray of light as it forcefully entered Mu Ru Yue's mind without her consent. This. What is going on? Hiss. Mu Ru Yue's brain experienced a splitting pain after a short moment. She tightly hugged her head, her small face turning deathly pale from the pain. After an unknown amount of time, her pain finally lessened. Mu Ru Yue was currently still clueless as to what had happened. Just now what? She looked curiously at the alchemist book in her hand with knitted eyebrows. At that very moment, a breeze blew in from the window, flipping the pages of the Book of Alchemy. Ha ha! It has been so many years since the senior was last released. This atmosphere. Could it be that I've already returned to the martial god continent? A domineering laughter resounded. Following that, Mu Ru Yue saw a black figure appear before her. The man before her was filled with vitality and wore a domineering smile on his smooth, distinct face. With his eyebrows raised, he gave off the feeling of a monarch's grandeur. He was like a remote aloof king who looked disdainfully upon all people in the world. 1. We equals how the emperors of the past referred to themselves. 2. It means not knowing the worth of the treasure makes you innocent, but knowingly hogging the treasure to yourself is a crime. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 7, The Master-Slave Contract. Chapter 7, The Master-Slave Contract. Little girl, were you the one that set this senior free? The man's eyebrows raised as he curled his lips into a seeming smile at Mu Ru Yue. Since you've helped this senior regain his freedom, this senior won't kill you. You're free to go. With a wave of his hand, a gush of wind was released from the man's sleeves. Suddenly, his expression changed as his body roughly released an oppressive aura. Who was it that contracted this senior? On top of it, it's that wretched kind of master and slave contract. Who did this? In a master and slave contract, for the entirety of his life, the contractee would not be able to go against the owner that he was contracted to. Otherwise, he would enter hell and would be unable to reincarnate for all eternity. His domineering dark eyes narrowed slightly as he shifted his gaze to Mu Ru Yue. Fury shining in his eyes, he shouted, "Were you the one that contracted this, senior?" "No. With your abilities, you don't even have enough strength to contract this, senior." "Could it be?" His gaze shifted to the Book of Alchemy that was quietly sitting in Ru Yue's hand. He gnashed his teeth, because that item had not only sealed him for so many years, it had also helped that girl successfully seal a contract with him. I have finally gained freedom, but only to have it smothered by that dreaded book. Once he recovered his powers, the very first thing he would do was destroy that stupid book. "Who are you?" Ru Yue, with a slightly cold gaze, looked emotionless at the handsome and domineering man before her. From this sudden incident, she had drawn two conclusions. First, her reincarnation must have had something to do with this Book of Alchemy. Second, the Book of Alchemy originated from the martial god continent. It was unknown how it had appeared in Huaxia. No matter what, since I am already here, I should just adapt to the situation. The most important thing now is to increase my powers. The way of life here in this large continent is the same as in Huaxia, where experts are revered. I can only continue to live if I become stronger. As long as I live, I'll find a way to return to Huaxia. The man's handsome face darkened, akin to the expression of one who thought that he had escaped from jail, only to find himself in another prison. Yan Jin, that's this senior's name. 10,000 years ago, whenever the senior's name was mentioned, countless blockheads would tremble in fear. But it was a pity that this senior fell into a human's trap and was sealed into a book. Since that seal lasted for 10,000 years, most likely only a minority would still remember this senior's name. "Who was the one that sealed you?" Ru Yue asked with a calm and collected gaze. "How can this senior know?" If this senior knew which bastard did this senior would make them regret ever having been born. Yan Jin gnashed his teeth in hatred. "It is unfortunate that during that time my power halved and the rest of the power in my body is unstable. Otherwise, even with the assistance of the Book of Alchemy, it would have been impossible for you to contract this senior." Realizing that he had fallen into the demonic claws of the human race yet again, Yan Jin's expression became extremely ugly. "Anyways, I don't plan on retaining you. If you want to leave, by all means, you're free to do so." Ru Yue got off the bed and personally poured a cup of tea without even giving that man a glance. Yan Jin's gaze was locked onto the young girl with an unfathomable glimmer in his deep eyes. He strode to Ru Yue and sat in front of her. Raising a corner of his lips, he said, "This senior doesn't plan on leaving yet. His current powers were too unstable and could only recover slightly faster by that young girl's side. So Yan Jin, who was hoping to recover his powers as soon as possible, decided to stay. Once his powers had fully recovered, the master and servant contract wouldn't be able to restrict him for long. If you want to stay, you must follow two of my rules." Ru Yue tasted the bitter tea with elegance. With a slight raise of her brow, she continued, "First, I don't care what identity you previously had, but at my place, you aren't allowed to display your arrogance. Second, my words must be followed unconditionally. If you can't do that, you can just leave. I don't plan to keep people that refuse to follow my orders only to backstab me during a battle. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 8, A Handsome Guy That Fell from the Sky. Chapter 8, A Handsome Guy That Fell from the Sky. The young girl's current resolute expression was so dazzling that it made Yan Jin slightly narrow his deep eyes carrying a darkness that would make people feel suffocated when they looked into them. He suddenly chuckled. With his sword-like brows raised, his eyes were as dark as the night of the new moon. "What do you think our contract is?" "It's the most overbearing kind of master and slave contract. Unless you terminate the contract between this senior and yourself, when you die, this senior will also have to die with you." If it weren't for this, he wouldn't have been that angry. Of course, he also did not want to leave right away, since the young girl was the owner of the Book of Alchemy. His power would definitely recover quicker around her rather than if he were on his own. Ru Yue raised her eyebrows. Did that mean he was sort of agreeing to her demands? You'd be too obvious if you followed me in this manner. Her words meant that he had to hide in the shadows and be out of sight. But with Yan Jin's personality, how could he willingly stay as a silhouette in the shadows? It wouldn't be a big deal for this senior. Yan Jin raised his domineering, sword-like brows as a black light ray enveloped his body. Gradually, his body shrunk and metamorphosed into a small palm-sized black beast. The appearance of the little beast's body was sparkling, translucent, and soft like a gelatinous dessert. It was truly adorable. The two large watery eyes on the palm-sized beast gave you the impression of seeing the indistinct water from them. It was unimaginable that this little beast, capable of causing much devastation among people, was the previous domineering handsome man. This is your original form. Ru Yue smilingly pinched the soft flexible body of the little beast, her eyes brimming with happiness. Instantly, Yan Jin, who seemed to have been struck by lightning, froze on the spot. A suspicious red color showed up on his black body. Judging by the location, and compared to a human's body, that place would have been his butt. His butt had actually been pinched twice by a young human girl? However, Ru Yue was unaware of her actions, so she did not have the slightest intention of letting go. Yan Jin gritted his teeth with hatred. If he had still been human at this moment, his handsome face would have turned blood red. Let's go. First, we'll head out to look around. Son. The royal Phoenix City displayed a prosperous look. The young girl walked along the buzzing streets, cold gazes watching her as she passed by. It was undeniable that she had really come to a different world which was similar to Huaxia. Even though she had the previous body owner's memory, this world was still entirely foreign to her. But I'll definitely be able to return where I came from during this life unless I die along the way. She pinched hard on the soft body of the little beast in her arms, 2 more times. Ru Yue slowly lifted her gaze with steadiness that was unlike the tender age expressed on her lovable face. The little beast glared angrily at her. Thinking about the girl's previous actions, his eyes turned watery with grievance. What could he do? In order to recover his powers quickly, he had to endure. Little girl, where are we heading to now? Yan Jin's domineering voice sounded in her mind, making Ru Yue raise her eyebrows. Stop talking. This senior is communicating with you through spirit. Yan Jin rolled his eyes. His expression was as though he was looking down on a country bumpkin who didn't know anything. But Ru Yue didn't bicker with him. She slightly raised her eyes with luminous light rays in her gaze. I'm thinking of ways to earn money. She needed to manufacture pills. The main components in manufacturing pills were the pill furnace and ingredients that would require money to purchase, but she was so poor that she did not have any money. At this moment, Ru Yue was passing by the Phoenix City's most luxurious Xiangyun restaurant, when she heard clamor from above her. She didn't know what happened, but was struck by something. Hiss! The pain of having her bones under pressure made Ru Yue take in a mouthful of cold air. Her eyebrows slightly knitted, and just as she raised her head to know what had struck her body, a handsome appearance suddenly came into sight. At that instant, she understood what it meant to be absolutely stunning, and to have looks that could sweep anyone off their feet. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 9, Is he really a fool or is it just a pretense? Chapter 9, Is he really a fool or is it just a pretense? That young man's appearance was so perfect it seemed that even when the moonlight were to shine on his face, no defects would have been found. He looked like the most brilliant artist's masterpiece as his face was so beautiful that it was hard for people to shift their gazes away from him. Wearing spotless white clothing, and inky black hair landing messily on Ru Yue's face, his eyes were so clear as if they had stayed unmarred by the world's dirt and smoke. They were so clear that they seemed out of this world. The young man did not have any intentions of getting up. He sniffed before a beautiful smile was displayed on his handsome face. He said, "Elder sister, you smell really nice." At that moment, Mu Ruyu's expression darkened, and she glared coldly at the young man on top of her body. "Get up!" Instantly, the young man's eyes fogged up with tears, feeling wronged as he asked pitifully, "Elder sister, have I done something wrong?" Mu Ruyu did not know why, but when she saw the handsome young man's pained expression, it reminded her of her little brother from her past life, someone for whom she would do anything to protect. Her brother liked using that kind of innocent and feeling wronged gaze to look at her. He. That fool really jumped. A mocking laughter resounded above her. Mu Ruyu clearly felt the young man's body stiffen, a layer of tears fogging his clear eyes. That incredibly pitiful appearance didn't appease the person above in the slightest. A fool is always a fool. He won't be able to change his entire life. The embroidered clothings gave the man standing at the window a noble grandeur. He spread his folding fan with a free, light smile on his face, looking at the people below him with disdain. Mu Ruyu slightly narrowed her eyes, and glared at the person who was on top of her body. Annoyed, she asked, "How long are you planning to stay on top of me?" Even though his gaze was really similar to her brother's, Mu Ruyu clearly knew those two were not the same person. The young man who had collided with her was really handsome. His beauty could literally make him an evildoer who could sweep anyone off their feet, especially with those pair of clear eyes, so innocent and enticing. After the young man stood up, she also got onto her feet, patting the dirt and dust off her body before raising her head to look at the man dressed in embroidered clothes, who had a pair of peach blossom eyes. In that instant, the man wearing embroidered clothing was also looking at Mu Ruyu, who was standing beside the handsome young man. "Your Highness." When Lingying saw the young girl dare to use such a gaze when she focused on His Highness, a bout of fury was instantly roused in his heart. His Highness had such noble status, how could she stare at him so impolitely? Extending an arm to block Lingying, Yi Yihua's lips curled into an excited smile. Today, Ben Wang tricked this fool to test whether he's really a fool or if he's just pretending. I couldn't feel reassured all these years. But based on the previous events, I can confirm that he's really a fool. This kind of fool would not be able to affect him at all. But if he really had been pretending for so many years, then he would bring a major setback to the meticulous scheme he had been plotting. After slightly narrowing his interest-filled peach blossom eyes, Yi Yihua's smile intensified. "Let's go." After closing his folding fan, Yi Yihua glanced at the young man one last time before turning around and disappearing from the window. "Elder sister, aren't you afraid of me?" The young man bit his lips, looking pitifully at Mu Ruyu with a pair of eyes so pure that they did not have a sliver of impurity in them. Mu Ruyu's eyebrows rose as she asked, "Why should I be afraid of you?" Hearing her words, the young man lowered his head as he whispered the reason holding his insecurities. "It is due to me being a fool that the maids who are serving me are always afraid." Seeing the young man's frail body, Mu Ruyu replied, "Neither hot nor cold, it's their business. In my opinion, there aren't any differences between people." 1. Ben Wang was used by princes in the past to refer to themselves. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 10, The Fool Isn't Simple. Chapter 10, The Fool Isn't Simple. The young man's eyes teared up again. He looked at the sight of Mu Ruyu's cold and lovable face with hazy eyes, and said, "Elder sister, your heart is really good." "My heart is good?" It was the first time that Mu Ruyu had heard someone say that to her. In her previous life, she had simply been a demoness who had taken numerous lives. If it weren't for the young man's similarity to her brother, she wouldn't have stayed to talk with him. But it was only to a certain extent. "You look older than me, so stop calling me elder sister." "But..." "There's no buts." Mu Ruyu viciously glared at him as she fiercely replied. The young man seemed to have been frightened. His eyes turned teary while he looked carefully at Ru Yue, who wore an unpleasant expression. Moreover, the young man's pitiful look softened Ru Yue's heart. She sighed lightly and said, "Sorry, I didn't mean to shout at you. But this is our first time meeting each other, after all, and I was unlucky enough to be your cushion. There shouldn't be any more incidences where we will meet again. Farewell." After saying that, she carried Yan Jin with her, who was watching the good show beside her, and she disappeared into the splendid sunlight without looking back at all. Thus, she didn't notice the changes in the young man's gaze as he looked at her. His initial innocent and enticing gaze had turned complicated, with traces of intrigue shining in his eyes. Yan Jin, who was being carried by Ru Yue, raised his domineering, dark eyes as he coldly stared at the handsome young man behind her. Even though at that moment the young man had already withdrawn his investigative gaze. That fool isn't simple. Was he really an innocent fool? Yan Jin laughed, since what did it have to do with him whether that man was really a fool or not? "Hey, have you heard that the King-1 sect is carrying out a test to help martial practitioners in the Phoenix City test their innate talent? This kind of opportunity comes only once in a few years. Let's quickly check it out." Test? Naturally, Ru Yue stopped in her tracks and slightly raised her head, a glimmer flashing in her dark eyes. From the previous owner's memory, she found that the King-1 sect would come to the Phoenix City every 3 years to help test the innate talents of those people that hadn't yet stepped on the path to becoming martial practitioners. A person's innate talent could predict their future success. Moreover, the King-1 sect did this to recruit potential talents into their sect. Ru Yue's previous fiancé, namely Crown Prince Jing, Yi Tianfeng, had been recruited to become an inner disciple of the King-1 sect due to his outstanding innate talent. I currently don't know the degree of my innate talent. Let's use this chance to find out. Ru Yue gently caressed her chin, a sudden brilliance shining in her eyes. Even though she had undergone the innate talent test 9 years before, her meridians had been blocked at that time, so the energy in her body had been impeded, and the outcome of the test turned out as her being trash. "Little girl, are you planning to sit for that test?" Yan Jin obviously read Ru Yue's thoughts and became excited. "Then head for it. This senior also wants to know what kind of talent you have, to be able to become the owner of the Book of Alchemy." Thinking about the Book of Alchemy that had been sealed within for 10,000 years, Yan Jin gnashed his teeth with hatred. "All right." Ru Yue nodded with a smile. "I'm also really interested in that test." After saying that, she followed the excited crowd and headed towards the testing hall that the King-1 sect had constructed within the world. However, Ru Yue knew that many people here were just spectators, as they had already undergone their innate talent tests. Those who were being tested today were 4 to 5-year-old toddlers, so she was standing out in the crowd like a sore thumb. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 11, Innate Test. Chapter 11, Innate Test. Who's that girl? Why is she only taking the innate talent test now? He. I guess her previous innate talent result wasn't ideal, so she wants to see if her talent increased as time passes. But this is innate talent and not the abilities test, how can there be any changes? But why does this girl seem so familiar to me? Where have I seen her before? Everyone looked at Ru Yue with astonishment. They couldn't bear to not discuss quietly amongst themselves, but the gazes shot at her contained mockery. Wasn't she too shameless to take the innate talent test when she was already in her teens? The crowd couldn't be blamed for not being able to recognize Ru Yue. When she became the fiancée of Crown Prince Jing and was regarded as the #1 trash of the Phoenix City, she became a public figure. Since then, every time she headed out she had to face mockery and verbal abuse. Ru Yue hadn't shown herself to the public for many years, so the people's impression of her had weakened. I remember her. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, "Isn't she the Mu family's Ru Yue? I recently saw her when I visited Mu Ting Er at Mu Manor." What? She's the #1 trash, the disgrace of the Mu family? After that person said those words, all gazes fell onto Ru Yue, the mockery in their eyes intensified. A trash that couldn't cultivate wouldn't be able to escape the fact of being a trash no matter how many times she tested. Under the bone-piercing gazes of the crowd, an adorable girl walked out with dissatisfaction displayed on her face. It was obvious that her result wasn't what she expected. Since the King-1 sex test results were confidential, nobody knew how terrible her innate talent is. "Miss, it's your turn." The manager raised his eyes and looked at Ru Yue before turning around and leading her into the hall. Within the vast hall, there was a copper stone placed in the middle. A white-bearded elder sat in the center of the hall with his eyes closed, resting. It wasn't until Ru Yue entered that he began to open his eyes, neither slow nor fast. When his light gaze swept Ru Yue, he gently stroked his beard as he calmly asked, "Do you know how to circulate your energy? You just need to walk up to the side of the stone and place your hand on the stone before trying to circulate your energy." Ru Yue listened to the elder and placed her hands above the stone. She gradually closed her eyes before circulating her energy. Swish! Suddenly, the copper stone emitted red rays of light. There were a few grades that could be tested from the testing stone. These grades were respectively red, orange, yellow, viridescent, green, blue, and purple. Red was the weakest, while purple was the strongest, but there was also a grade from Legends that was said to be colorless. Thus, colorless was technically the strongest type of innate talent. Red. The old man didn't have any special expression. On this continent, most people had red-colored innate talent. They were the ones most unsuited for training, and even if they trained, they wouldn't have many accomplishments. Just as he wanted to call for the next person, the red ray of light suddenly changed. Orange. The red light had turned orange. The elder gasped, his mouth wide open. Shouldn't the testing stone calculate the result instantly? When had it changed its color before? It was as though he was looking at a ghost. But the changes in color hadn't stopped. It turned from orange to yellow, viridescent, green, blue. The elder's expression gradually stiffened. His mouth became stiff, unable to speak out. When the changes finally stabilized at blue, he was still too astonished to say a thing. 15 years ago, the King-1 sect had recruited an inner disciple named Tian Feng. He at last became a disciple of Grandmaster Tian Yuan. But that fellow's innate talent was green. However, it was great that it finally stopped. The elder took up a teacup, wanting to use the tea to suppress his shock. But the very next moment, his hand shivered, nearly causing him to drop his teacup. Purple. The color had turned to purple. The elder took in a deep breath. It was very rare to have a genius with purple innate talent. There should only be a few of them within the continent. But the changes hadn't stagnated. The purple light ray slowly disappeared from the testing stone, but Ru Yue's hand still pressed upon it. If she had let go of the stone and the color faded, then such a phenomenon would have been normal. But if her hand was still pressed on the stone, the purple light shouldn't fade. That was, unless it was that special circumstance. Bang, dot. The teacup in the elder's hand slipped and crashed onto the floor, shattering into numerous pieces. The heavens knew how much he loved that cup, but now, even after his beloved teacup had shattered, he didn't pay any attention to it. He instead stared at Ru Yue, transfixed. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 12, Peerless Genius. Chapter 12, Peerless Genius. Colorless was innate talent from the legends. How many years had it been since anyone had colorless innate talent? It had probably been countless thousands of years. But now, a person with a colorless innate talent was discovered by him. The elder's breaths quickened. With bloodshot eyes, his gaze towards Ru Yue was like that of a wolf that hadn't had delicacies in a long time, and now wanted to immediately pounce on its prey. Ru Yue released her hand from the stone. When she saw the progress of her results, it instantly gave her a shock. "I've already tested, so I'll be leaving." According to the memories of the previous owner, Ru Yue knew that purple was the innate talent's peak. Since she had achieved what she wanted, she didn't feel the need to stay. "Wait!" the elder hastily shouted. It would be a joke if he just let a peerless genius slip away. He rubbed his hands together. Smiling, the elder said, "Little girl, I'm an elder of the King-1 sect. You can just call me Elder Zhao. Do you know the details of your test result? Ru Yue's brows lifted as she replied, "Isn't it purple?" "Purple?" Elder Zhao smiled bitterly. "If you were just purple, it would have been alright." Her heart thumped. Ru Yue's expression slowly sunk. Could it be that her result wasn't actually what she'd expected? Suddenly, when she thought of the sudden fading of the purple ray of light, her heart gradually chilled. Colorless. Do you know what it means to be colorless? How could Elder Zhao not know what the little girl was thinking? He coldly glared at her. At the peak of the martial path, it focuses on nothingness. Moreover, having a colorless innate talent, it succeeds purple innate talents by more than just a fold. It has been many thousands of years since someone had such an innate talent. Which of those experts that had colorless innate talent hadn't reached the summit of the martial world? Do you still think that purple and colorless innate talent is still comparable? It was really the first time Ru Yue had heard about colorless innate talent, so she couldn't bear not to knit her brows. That's right. Little girl, you should also take a mental strength test as well. We don't usually give such tests to the public, but today, you're an exception. After saying that, Elder Zhao hastily took out a mental strength testing stone and placed it beside the martial innate testing stone. The mental strength test is also very simple. You just have to strike at the stone with your mental power. When the stone absorbs your mental power, it will expand. The more it expands, the stronger your mental strength is. Elder Zhao was excited as he anxiously waited to see how many surprises this young girl would give him. An intense mental power flooded the room and had made even Elder Zhao feel its tyrannical power. His expression was slightly dazed as he stared fixedly at the stone in front of Ru Yue. During that instant when the mental power struck at the stone had absorbed the mental power and started to rapidly expand. It simply kept expanding, as though no matter how much it absorbed, it was still insufficient. Elder Zhao's expression stiffened as he looked as though he'd seen a ghost. How much mental power would be used to create such a situation? Of course, Elder Zhao couldn't know and would never know that Ru Yue's intense mental powers was due to her contract with the Book of Alchemy. As the ray of light intensified, Elder Zhao's mouth was no longer closed. He didn't have the time to snap out from his shock before a shattering sound was heard. The testing stone had turned into powder. The entire testing hall returned to its previous calmness, with the exception of human hearts. Even if nobody knew how sturdy the testing stone was, Elder Zhao would know that even if it were an Xiantian expert, they could only be able to chip a corner of the stone. Currently, that stone had been blown into smithereens before him. This meant that her boundless mental power was already beyond the limit of the testing stone. How gifted is this little girl? Elder Zhao's expression was still stiff. Obviously, he hadn't recovered from his astonishment. From her results today, there wouldn't be anyone as suitable as her to become an alchemist. She could also be a peerless genius in cultivating the martial arts. Heaven Stage Alchemist would already be the peak status ranking on the continent. But to her, perhaps, it wouldn't be impossible. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 13, King-1 Sect's Chief Alchemist. Chapter 13, King-1 Sect's Chief Alchemist. Everyone, let's take a guess on how Ru Yue's test results will be. But do we even need to? She definitely won't have any. Ha ha. Let's wait for her to come out and determine the results from her expression. As he said that, a plainclothed figure entered the crowd's eyes. The young girl's expression was still as cold as ice. There wasn't any emotions in her eyes, nor was there any happiness. It was just the same as when she'd first arrived. Upon seeing her expression, it had further confirmed the crowd's thoughts. No matter what, trash would always be trash. Since everyone's gaze was on Ru Yue, nobody paid attention to the manager who had followed behind her with an expression of unfaded astonishment. After he saw Ru Yue leave, the manager withdrew his gaze before announcing coldly, "Everyone, Elder Zhao suddenly has matters to attend to today. The testing will temporarily stop here. Please come again next year at the same time and day." After tossing those words out, he turned around to headed back to the testing hall. Elder Zhao. The manager respectfully cupped his fists as he reported, "I have already dispersed the crowd." Elder Zhao nodded. When he thought back to that test result, there was unconcealed excitement in his eyes. You must treat this matter as though it had never happened, and not tell a single soul of anything that had occurred. Do you understand? Elder Zhao expressed rare seriousness, so when the manager heard his order, he hastily nodded. Elder Zhao, do not worry. I definitely will not tell anyone about this. Alright, settle the rest of the matters here. I'll head over to Grandmaster Wu Yue's place now. That little girl's innate talent was too astonishing. If other sects were to know of this, they would definitely fight for her. This test mustn't be made known to anyone. When he thought that such a talent was found by him, he felt extremely jubilant. Since there would be a talent tournament soon, the people from King-1 sect had appeared in the Phoenix City to observe the upcoming matches. The innate talents test was to discover talents, but that didn't mean that ordinary talents couldn't soar through perseverance. As such, the talent tournament was born. At an inn, two elders were casually chatting. One elder wore a yellow-striped garment with a green lower garment and had a smart appearance. The other elder wore gray cotton-padded clothing and a red coat, which made him look out of place. Ha ha! Tianyuan, I remember that your disciple, Yi Tianfeng, is also Crown Prince Jing of the Kingdom of Ziyu? Wu Yue laughing as he looked at the yellow-striped garmented elder. He humorously said, hee hee. That Crown Prince Jing could be counted as both a handsome and talented youth. It's your luck to have him. Grandmaster Wu Yue must be joking. Tianyuan chuckled with some reserve as he replied, if Grandmaster Wu Yue really wants to recruit a disciple, there will be countless talents that will flock towards you in order to be taken under your wing. The title of Chief Alchemist of the King-1 sect would make a great recruitment signboard. How can I compare to Grandmaster Wu Yue? It's just that Grandmaster Wu Yue's sight is too high, so there aren't many that enter your eye. But, Feng Er's talent is really commendable. He has great potential in becoming an alchemist. I've already started to educate him in manufacturing pills. Wu Yue gently stroked his beard with a light smile, not commenting on Tianyuan's remark. He was just casually chatting out of boredom. Truthfully, talents like Yi Tianfeng really didn't enter his eyes. At this moment, a knock was heard from outside before Elder Zhao pushed open the door and entered. While looking at the elder, who spoke cheerfully and wittily, he suppressed his heartfelt excitement by taking in a deep breath before greeting, Grandmaster Wu Yue. Grandmaster Tianyuan. Elder Zhao, what's wrong? Has the test ended? Wu Yue smiled lightly as he curiously asked Elder Zhao, who had a reddened face from excitement. It hasn't, but I've something to report to you, so I've ended the test prematurely. What's this pressing matter that made you drop the test in order to report to me? It's like this, Grandmaster Wu Yue. Thinking back to the testing hall, Elder Zhao's expression was extremely stirred up. Previously at the testing hall, I've discovered a peerless genius. She's such a genius that even Grandmaster Tianyuan's disciple Yi Tianfeng couldn't reach even a percentage of her talents. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 14, Using Energy to Grow Medicine. Chapter 14, Using Energy to Grow Medicine. Tianyuan's expression slightly darkened. Yi Tianfeng was his disciple after all, so when he heard someone describe him in such a manner, he would naturally be unhappy. Elder Zhao, even if the innate talent of the child is great, it shouldn't be comparable to Feng Er. Excluding his talent in martial cultivation, he can still become an alchemist. Seeing that Tianyuan's expression turned unpleasant, Elder Zhao felt that he went a little overboard in describing it that way. Grandmaster Tianyuan, you're mistaken. That genius isn't a child, but a 14-year-old young girl. 14 years old? Asked Wu Yue, his white brows slightly knitted as he was unable to understand. We carry out free tests every 3 years for the commoners. That young girl should have already been tested. Elder Zhao, what happened? I don't know the details of the situation, but that young girl has legendary colorless innate talent. The summit of the martial path was nothingness, so people that had colorless innate talents were destined to travel on a path ordinary people were unable to trek. Wu Yue abruptly stood up and stared fixedly at Elder Zhao. Are you speaking the truth? It really is. After swallowing a mouthful of spittle, Elder Zhao said with amazement, it's really the truth. I still can't process that a person with colorless innate talent had appeared and was within my sights. Following that, I gave her a mental strength test. The testing stone was overwhelmed by her power that it directly exploded. Wu Yue gasped as astonishment nearly overwhelmed him. After a short moment, he snapped out of his shock and smiled wryly, shaking his head. I think I just found the fitting candidate for a disciple. Tianyuan's body shook as he wasn't able to suppress his shock from Wu Yue's words. Who was Grandmaster Wu Yue? He was the chief alchemist of the King-1 sect, and even the head of the sect gave him face. When the daughter of the sect head wanted to be his disciple, he had directly rejected her without any thoughts. Now he wanted to recruit a disciple? But from this young girl's innate talent, she really was worthy to be Grandmaster Wu Yue's disciple. It was reasonable for Grandmaster Wu Yue, who had high sights, to be moved. Walking along the streets of Phoenix City, Ru Yue stopped as her gaze fell upon medicine ingredients that had been tossed to the floor by a medicinal shop. With brows slightly knitted, she commented, even though these medicinal ingredients aren't expensive, it's a pity for it to be thrown away. Yan Jin was startled. Little girl, even though the senior isn't an alchemist and is clueless on those things, from how I see it, when the medicine's leaves have turned yellow, it has obviously withered. If they don't throw them away, will they still be able to sell them? Ru Yue didn't bother with Yan Jin. She went over to the medicinal ingredients and carefully picked them up. Little girl, what do you plan on doing with those withered ingredients? Yan Jin couldn't understand Ru Yue's actions. Didn't I said earlier that I planned on earning money? She placed the medicine leaves in her embrace before wordlessly heading along the pathway. By the time Ru Yue reached her home, it was already dusk. She directly went back to her room. Pang! She immediately shut the door. Yan Jin didn't know what she was planning to do, so he blinked curiously at her. Ru Yue took out the withered medicinal ingredients in her embrace as she narrowed her eyes in deep thought. In the cultivation realm, there was a method that could use energy to grow medicinal plants, enabling these dying medicine leaves to become reinvigorated. Even though ancient martial skills and cultivation are different, there are still some similar areas. It is still unknown whether the cultivation realm's method of using energy to grow medicinal plants will work in this world. Thinking about that, she gently placed her palm above the medicinal plant. Traces of energy flowed from her palm and into the medicinal ingredient beneath her hand. Actually, Ru Yue was just testing her idea out as she currently hadn't officially become a cultivator. She still hadn't even entered the first martial stage. Thus, there was only a slight possibility that it would work. She taught this method to Yan Jin because with his powers, it should work easily. But the outcome stunned Ru Yue. Under her warm energy, the previously withered medicinal plant had actually regained its life, bit by bit. The yellowed leaves now gave off an aura filled with vitality. Yan Jin was stupefied as, even with his immense knowledge, he didn't know such a nature-defying method existed. Moreover, he felt that the medicine leaf was much larger compared to before. What's going on? Ru Yue withdrew her hands as she looked at the several-fold larger medicine leaf before her. She blinked with amazement. Shouldn't this method not allow further growth of the medicinal ingredient and simply help it regain its life? Why had the energy assisted in the medicinal plant's growth? This was already outside her knowledge. A glimmer flashed in her eyes. Ru Yue had an idea. Could this have been due to her establishing a contract with the Book of Alchemy? What other reasons were there to explain this unnatural phenomenon? She currently needed to get stronger as soon as possible. Along the way, all of her doubts would naturally be resolved. The next morning, when the light of sunrise landed on Ru Yue's face, she finally left her meditative state. Even though the previous owner of her body was trash, she'd read a lot of cultivation books, so she was able to quickly enter the meditative state. There wouldn't be too great of a leap in power after just a single night, but she had already become a first martial stage practitioner. She was no longer trash that would be despised and bullied. Bang! The door was kicked open. A ferocious old wet nurse walked in and disdainfully glanced at the simple and unadorned room before coldly shifting her gaze to the young girl. Eldest young mistress, the master has requested your presence. Upon saying that, she viciously glared at Ru Yue before turning around, leaving the room. Yan Jin narrowed his eyes. Even though she was his owner against his own will, she still had the title of being Yan Jin's master. If others knew that his master had been bullied by an old lady, it would be so shameful. Swish! Yan Jin turned into a black ray and ruthlessly struck at the old wet nurse. Pang! The soft body collided against the old wet nurse's back. She wasn't prepared for that, resulting in her falling down a flight of stairs, becoming a sorry figure after she made a couple of rolls. Those rolls had nearly broken her old bones. I-oh! I-oh! The old wet nurse painfully cried out as she lay on the floor. She was in so much pain that she couldn't stand up. Cold sweat flowed down her face. Wet Nurse Wang, what's wrong? What happened? The maids quickly dropped what they were doing to go and support the old wet nurse after hearing the commotion. It's the eldest young mistress. She'd pushed me. I'm so pitiful. I had always done my best, working my old bones to serve the Mu family. Furthermore, I had woken up early to wake the young mistress, yet she treated me like this. Wet Nurse Wang cried out, making it seem as though she had really been bullied by Ru Yue. She hadn't realized that after she said that, the crowd's expression became weird. Curiously turning around to see what the crowd was looking at, she found a girl with a cold gaze sitting on her bed, smiling at her. But her smile was so icy that it gave people chills. It was a short period of a few breaths when the wet Nurse Wang had fallen. If it was really done by the eldest young mistress, then she shouldn't have been able to return to her bed so quickly. Wet Nurse Wang was also clueless as to what had happened. Ru Yue got out of her bed and put on her shoes. When she stepped up to Wet Nurse Wang's side, she paused slightly and, with lips curled back to a smile, said with an icy gaze, "Don't offend me. Otherwise, you'll receive a payback like just now." Ru Yue looked so dazzling at this moment, like a pearl that emitted brilliant light. For a moment, the maids were stunned. Was this young girl with the ice-cold gaze really the good-for-nothing eldest young mistress, Ru Yue? It seemed as though her entire personality had changed. Ru Yue raised her head and puffed out her chest, ignoring the crowd's gazes as she headed towards to the Mu family's lounge. Since all gazes were on Mu Ryu, nobody noticed that when she left, a small black beast in her embrace raised his head. Its gaze carried a domineering and ruthless light. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 15, The Emperor Requested for an Audience. Chapter 15, The Emperor Requested for an Audience. In the Mu family's lounge, Mu Ting had an unpleasant expression as he sat at the head seat along with Mu Ting Er and Mu Yue at his side. Seeing Mu Ryu come late, Mu Yue had an elated smile on her face, seeking happiness from her upcoming misfortune. In comparison, Mu Ting Er, who wore a silk tangerine yellow elegant dress, was instead trying to convince Mu Ting to not punish Mu Ryu. Elder sister Ting Er, you're too kind-hearted. Seeing Mu Ting Er trying to help Mu Ryu, Mu Yue coldly snorted. It's because of your kindness that you get bullied. Have you forgotten how she treated you that day? She pointed at your face and shouted that you were just an adopted daughter. Even though elder sister Ting Er is adopted, she had brought so much face to our Mu family. Haven't you heard all the noble brothers praises elder sister Ting Er? On the other hand, a certain someone who only knows how to eat and stay in the family is literally useless. Sadly, that kind of person is the genuine young mistress of the Mu family. If elder sister Ting Er were to be my blood sister, I would be satisfied for life. Shui Er. Mu Ting Er's expressed anger on her face, but there were still undisguised complacency in her eyes. You are still siblings from the same parent, don't go overboard. But I had really hoped that the person mother had given birth to was elder sister Ting Er instead. Mu Yue pouted, feeling wronged as elder sister Ting Er chided her for that trash. This made her loathing of Mu Ryu intensify. That trash was so unfeeling. Even when elder sister Ting Er treated her so well, she still clung onto Crown Prince Jing even when she couldn't match up to him in any way. Mu Ryu just folded her arms across her chest from start to end, quietly watching the good show. There was an icy smile playing on her face as she stayed calm and collected. This made Mu Ting Er unable to make her out. With Mu Ryu's usual temper, she would have already made a ruckus. What's the matter? Mu Ryu asked with slightly raised brows. Her voice carried traces of laziness from not being completely awake yet. If there's nothing important, I'll head back to my room. Mu Ting's expression darkened. Is this the kind of attitude you should be using towards your father? Then can you tell me what kind of attitude I should treat you with? You? Mu Ting's complexion turned ashen from anger. This young girl was really too undisciplined and out of control. Father, please calm down. Mu Ting Er hastily helped soothe Mu Ting's chest in order to calm his breathing. She then raised her head and looked impatiently at the young girl as she rebuked, elder sister, father is only worried about you. When he heard that you went to participate the test at the testing hall. Ting Er. Mu Ting let go of Mu Ting Er's hand. He looked cold and gloomy. Stop helping that delinquent. Mu Ryu, when the officials were having their meals last night, did you know what they said? They said that you were shameless enough to actually test your innate talent with a group of 4 to 5-year-old toddlers. You're a trash and you still wouldn't believe that no matter how many times you are tested, you still would be a trash. Why didn't you think about father? Your actions allowed others to use it as a blade to scrape my face. I've raised you for so many years and also turned a blind eye on your incompetence, but you actually thought of ways to let those people humiliate your father. Mu Ting violently panted as he said those words in a single breath. At this moment, his complexion was still terrible as he thought that having such a trash and unsettling person as his daughter was his life's greatest humiliation. Have you said your piece? If you're done, then I'll be heading back to my room. Mu Ryu yawned as she felt that she would be better off cultivating rather than listening to Mu Ting. Stop right there. Seeing the young girl turn around to leave, Mu Ting's complexion became increasingly unpleasant. Previously, even though Mu Ryu was trash, she had always listened to him. What was going on today? That trash knows how to rebel now? Father, please let me try. Mu Ting Er wrinkled her eyebrow. Even though she wanted Ru Yue to be punished, she still had a more important matter. Elder sister, the reason father is waiting here for you isn't for that matter. An imperial decree arrived from the palace that requested you and father to head to the palace in order to meet with the emperor. Ru Yue suddenly stopped her steps with slightly raised eyebrows. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 16, Marriage Crisis Part 1. Chapter 16, Marriage Crisis Part 1. In a glorious and luxurious throne room, an elder wearing a bright yellow dragon robe sat on the platform within the hall. A beautiful and alluring girl sat at his side. She looked very young. Her lovely and moving appearance would make any man unable to suppress his desires. This included the Emperor of Ziyu, who was already too old to have any energy for bed matters. When Ru Yue stepped into the hall, she received everyone's attention. In the throne room, excluding the Emperor of Ziyu and his most beloved imperial consortia, there were also a few officials, like the Chancellor, and some descendants of the royal family present. It's her. Yi Yihua excitedly stroked his chin. Wasn't she the unlucky person that had acted as a cushion during that fool's fall? He had been unable to forget the gaze she'd cast at him that day. That girl was interesting, but it was a pity she was the trash of Thunder Phoenix City. Greetings to your majesty. Mu Qing knelt down and used his hands to constantly tug at Ru Yue, who wasn't responding. He glared at her, saying, "Why are you in a daze? Quickly kneel to greet his majesty." Ru Yue was still unresponsive. Stubbornness emitted from her cold gaze. As a person who had lived two lives, she would only kneel before two people. One was her previous life's teacher who had taught her wholeheartedly. The other was her grandfather who had pampered her to the bones and who had passed the book of alchemy into her hands. Other than those two, she would rather die than get rid of the arrogance in her bones and kneel before others. Ru Yue. Seeing the emperor's expression darken, Mu Qing became anxious and shouted softly. When did this delinquent daughter turn out to be so undisciplined? It didn't matter if she died alone, but it will be a crime if she implicates the entire Mu family. Impudent! Your Majesty! Suddenly, a sweet voice sounded from his side. The Emperor of Ziyu shifted his gaze from Ru Yue and looked tenderly at his most beloved woman. He asked, "Beloved concubine, what's the matter?" "Your Majesty, your servant one is a little hungry." Ru Yue rubbed her tummy and, with a bashful smile, said, "Your servant wants His Majesty to accompany her for a meal after you settle matters here." Ha ha! The Emperor of Ziyu laughed as he embraced Ru Yue with a large hand and said with tender feelings, "All right, we will quickly settle matters here in order to accompany my beloved concubine with her meal. Your servant then thanks your Majesty in advance." Ru Yue suppressed her heartfelt disgust as she revealed a happy smile on her absolutely splendid face. When the Emperor of Ziyu's attention was still on her, she turned her gaze to Ru Yue and secretly winked at her. This confirmed Ru Yue's thought that that woman was purposely helping her. Why? She definitely wouldn't have known me prior to this day, so why was she helping me? You are Ru Yue? The Emperor of Ziyu looked at the young girl's delicate appearance. He secretly sighed as he thought that this Ru Yue of the Mu family already had an appearance that could cause the downfall of a country and caused suffering to the people at such a young age. If it wasn't her being a trash, Feng Er probably wouldn't have been so eager to withdraw from the marriage. Indeed. Ru Yue looked directly at the Emperor of Ziyu's eyes without fear. Ru Yue's action caused the Emperor of Ziyu to show a dissatisfied frown, but he didn't flare up. He used a cold tone as he said, "We had ordered you to come today for a matter. We initially had not thought it through when we ordered the marriage between you and Crown Prince Jing. We shall now terminate that engagement and help you pick another husband." All of the princes and royals here today haven't had a main wife, so you shouldn't feel wronged getting married to them. Hearing his words, all of the princes and royal members couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even though this girl had an appearance that could overturn the country, and even if she was trash, she was still the daughter from the Mu family. If she were to go to their manor, she definitely wouldn't be just a concubine. But how could they let such a trash be titled as their main wife? Trash wouldn't provide them any assistance. 1. Your servant is how concubines refer to themselves before the emperor. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 17, Marriage Crisis Part 2. Chapter 17, Marriage Crisis Part 2. I agree with withdrawing the marriage, but Mu Yue glanced at all the apprehensive princes and royal members as she smiled, saying, "It isn't that the royal clan withdrew the marriage. It's I, Mu Yue, that isn't willing to wed Crown Prince Jing. I also do not want to have any relationship with royalties." Mu Yue. Mu Ting shouted. Is this delinquent seeking death? If she is, don't even think of pulling him down with her. What kind of status is the imperial clan? They were already polite to allow her to be married as the main wife of one of the royal descendant. Even if they were to order her to be a mere concubine, I, Mu Ting, wouldn't decline. But this delinquent didn't know what was good for her and directly said she looked down upon all of the royals here. Mu Yue lightly glanced at Mu Ting, sneering slightly. Now you know to be fearful? Why didn't you fear it when you initially brought me here? I, Mu Yue, have my pride. To be honest, I despise Crown Prince Jing, who's like a stud horse planting seeds everywhere. Even if I was blind, I wouldn't fancy him. A stud horse that planted seeds everywhere? The princes and royal members were stunned. Did that include them as well? Seeing the ashen complexion of the Emperor of Ziyu, the crowd gasped and didn't dare to say a word. Her words, however, had almost made Ru Yue, who sat beside the Emperor of Ziyu, clap her hands in praise. Wasn't this the case? Who in the royal family, excluding the deceased King Nan, didn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Every one of them were really germ-ridden stud horses. Pfffff. Suddenly, an inappropriate laughter broke through the tension. Yi Hua waved his folding fan as he smiled, saying, "My apologies. I couldn't bear holding back my laughter. Mu Yue, if you weren't trash, I'd definitely marry you. I had said I wasn't interested in stud horses. My man will only have me as his woman and not go around getting infected with germs. Thus, even if I'm trash, I won't marry you. With a slight raise of his brows, Yi Hua gently waved the folding fan after spreading it open. Royal father, your son has a suggestion. The emperor's mood had already calmed by this time, but his expression was so overcast that water droplets seemed to be able to drip from his face. You may speak what's on your mind. Royal father, do you still remember the fool who was the only remaining heir of royal uncle's bloodline? That fool hasn't touched a woman in his life. Furthermore, there is merely an old wet nurse serving him. He probably hasn't had much physical contact with women in his life. In your son's opinion, that fool and her are well matched. Why don't you let them get engaged? My dear beloved little cousin, you should thank me for sending such a devastatingly beautiful wife to you. Thinking about this, Yi Hua was elated, but he didn't know that this decision would become his lifelong regret. Are you referring to the Ghost King? The Emperor of Ziyu smiled coldly. He was a vengeful person. Since he couldn't deal with the girl on the spot due to considering the Mu family's face, he could still give her a slight punishment. Alright, we shall immediately write an imperial decree. In 3 months' time, the daughter of the Mu family, Mu Yue, will be wedded to the Ghost King, Yi Wuchen. Ghost King? Memories about the Ghost King flowed into Mu Yue's mind. The Ghost King was the son of the Emperor of Ziyu's blood-related younger brother, King Nanan. If it wasn't for King Nanan being born 30 years after the Emperor of Ziyu, the throne to the kingdom of Ziyu would have been his. It was a pity that life loved to play with people, making it impossible for him to ascend to the throne. What was more incredible was that King Nanan and his imperial consort were madly in love, so as the prince of the kingdom of Ziyu, he had only wedded a single wife in his lifetime. He left only one son, Yi Wuchen. After King Nanan and his imperial consort were assassinated one night, Yi Wuchen, who had personally witnessed it, was literally scared senseless. This resulted in him becoming a fool afterwards. From the rumors, the fool wasn't only dull-witted, but he also had a ghost-like appearance. All of the maids that went to serve him were scared to insanity by his appearance. Therefore, nobody was willing to step into Ghost King Manor from then on. Since he had inherited the king's position of King Nanan, another title was bestowed upon him, Ghost King. Of course, the Ghost King rarely left his manor. There was only an old wet nurse that took care of him. Excluding those from the royal family, no one really knew if his appearance was as ghastly as the rumors. Ru Yue, who was initially unwilling to wed into the royal family, had a different idea now. If she went to Ghost King Manor, it would be easier to carry out her goals than doing so in the Mu family. This would be more suitable for her progressing cultivation. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 18, I Find You Dirty. Chapter 18, I Find You Dirty. Alright, I accept. Ru Yue smiled. Since there were only 2 people in Ghost King Manor, nobody would come to disturb her. If she stayed with the Mu family, it would be really inconvenient. After her powers had increased, a manor couldn't restrict her path. Ru Yue, however, currently didn't know that with this decision, she had tied herself to one guy for her entire life. They were destined to be together for better or worse, for all eternity. We will shortly pass down the order to the Mu family. To all beloved officials, if you don't have any more matters, this assembly is adjourned. The Emperor of Ziyu impatiently waved his hands. He couldn't wait any longer to enjoy lunch with his beloved concubine. After the crowd left, Yi Hua smilingly walked to Ru Yue's side before lifting her chin with his fan. With a gaze filled with feeling within his peach blossom eyes, he smiled like a devil trying to seduce his next victim. Lady Mu, that fool doesn't know about feelings, so he wouldn't be able to satisfy a girl. If you have needs, you can freely come to find Ben Wang. Ben Wang's manor will always be open to you. I'll definitely let Lady Mu know the Ben Wang's goods. Ru Yue narrowed her eyes and slapped the fan away. She looked at him coldly and mockingly. Do I need to repeat myself? I'm not interested in a stud horse. You should have loitered in your courtyard often. Perhaps your entire body is filled with germs. If you stand before me, I'll always find you dirty. Yi Hua's smile stiffened a little before he regained his distinguished and accomplished passionate appearance. Marrying that fool is the same as being a widow, so Ben Wang believes you will seek Ben Wang out. With Ben Wang's technique, Ben Wang is confident that even if it's a virgin, she won't be in too much pain. Ru Yue chuckled lightly. Your body can be covered with germs, but I won't allow anyone to pass those germs onto my body. Your Highness, if you don't have any matters, please leave, but... After staring profoundly at her for a length of time, Yi Hua chuckled shallowly. Ben Wang only hopes that after you wed my cousin, you don't come crying to Ben Wang. Yi Hua had talent and looks, so there were countless girls that wanted to have a one-night stand with him. He couldn't believe that there would be a girl that could resist his charm. Even though he couldn't wed this girl, it shouldn't be bad for her to be his. The fool wouldn't know how to touch her anyway. After the Emperor of Ziyu announced the dismissal of the court, Mu Qing didn't wait for Ru Yue. He hurriedly wanted to inform this great news to Mu Ting Er. This resulted to Ru Yue getting lost inside the vast palace. Beat the fool to death. Beat him to death. That's right, how can our palace let a fool enter it? Fool, let me tell you this. Royal father had already found a wife for you, and it's the #1 trash of the city. A fool and a trash is compatible. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, she heard a clamor up ahead. Ru Yue raised her head to look forth. She saw a helplessly frail body being surrounded by luxuriously embroidered princes and princesses. After hearing that familiar voice, Ru Yue was startled. Wasn't he the one that had fallen onto her yesterday? From their conversation, could it be that he was the Ghost King? Didn't the rumors say that the Ghost King had a ghost-like appearance? How could this young man, who looked innocent and handsome, have a ghost-like appearance? I only came to collect my kite. The young man tightly pursed his lips. His grief-stricken appearance made him look like a lively and small animal. This made a few girls soft-hearted. They pulled on the sleeves of the boys beside them, saying, "Let's forget it." Forget it? What do you mean forget it? Humph. This fool actually came here of his own free will, without our royal father's order. How can I let him go scot-free? Saying that, the boy snatched the kite in the young man's hands and ripped it in half before viciously throwing it at the young man's face. Here's your kite. The young man slightly lowered his head, making people think that he was upset with having his kite torn apart. Nobody, however, saw that there wasn't a sliver of unhappiness upon his handsome face. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 19, The Fool and the Trash. Chapter 19, The Fool and the Trash. When the boy wanted to slap the young man, a slim hand locked tightly around his slender arm. The grip almost made him cry out in pain. Who are you? Let go of Ben Huangzi one. If not, Ben Huangzi will make his royal father kill you. The boy glared viciously at the plain-clothed girl with ill intentions. This method worked all the time without exception. The girl before him would immediately kneel down before him, begging for forgiveness. Who let his father be the emperor of Ziyu so that everyone would fear him? Ru Yue's eyebrows raised as she looked at the boy. He was only about 5 years old and was the son of the near 70-year-old emperor of Ziyu. It seemed everyone in the royal family were really stud horses. Who am I? Ru Yue chuckled lightly. I'm the trash that you had mentioned as the fiancé of the Ghost King. Even if I'm a trash, however, it's more than sufficient to deal with brats like yourself. Bang! Ru Yue tossed him hard onto the ground. With a calm gaze, she surveyed the princes and princesses. They were stunned by her voice that was so cold, it seemed inhumane. Remember, he's the fiancé of Ru Yue. I don't care how old you are or even who your father is. If you dare to hurt him, I won't hesitate to punish you for that. The young girl's voice was really calm, but it instead created chills in their hearts. Yi Wu-chen looked at Ru Yue who stood before him, thinking about something. Let's go. Turning around and holding onto the young man's hand, Ru Yue pulled him away without any concerns for the stunned princes and princesses. She had always been a heartless demoness. No matter if her opponent was a kid or an elder, she would still ruthlessly act as she pleased. This was a world where the strong eats the weak. Elder sister. Yi Wu-chen looked brightly at Ru Yue. With an innocent smile on his handsome face and eyes that were bright and simple, he said, "You treat me so well." Ru Yue ignored him and just pulled him forward. Finally, at an unmanned corner, Ru Yue stopped and turned her head towards the young man behind her. Are you the Ghost King? Under her gaze, Yi Wu-chen nodded. You seem different from what the rumors depicted you to be. Ru Yue, with a false smile, questioned with her brows raised. The rumors said that the Ghost King looked like a ghost, so for a moment I couldn't guess that you were the Ghost King. His body shuddered, and Yi Wu-chen lowered his head. He pitifully said, I really am extremely ugly. The maids, however, weren't scared senseless due to my face, but here. He pointed at his body. With a face filled with helplessness, Yi Wuchen continued, "Elder sister, I'm really ugly here. Please don't look at it, alright? You'll also be scared to insanity. Don't worry. I'm not that weak. Your body seemed to have something wrong with it. Can I have a look? We'll be living together in the future, so I need to have an understanding." But Yi Wuchen wanted to explain, but Ru Yue didn't have that sort of patience. She directly ripped his clothes apart, exposing his body. She couldn't help but take in a mouthful of air. His body was filled with scars that resemble earthworms crawling all over his skin. They carried a faint color of blood, so his white skin looked ghost-like with those scars all over his body. With that glance, however, Ru Yue understood that Yi Wuchen had been poisoned. She had a solution for dealing with that poison, but currently didn't have the ability to carry it out. At that moment, Yi Wuchen closed his eyes in fright. He didn't dare to look at Ru Yue as her eyes might contain the same disdain and disgust as all the rest. "Open your eyes." An authoritative voice rang in his ears. Yi Wuchen cautiously cracked his eyes open and discovered that there wasn't a trace of disgust in Ru Yue's eyes. Her gaze was as clear as spring. "Elder sister, am I really ugly? It's only a little poison, but nothing much." Ru Yue smiled. "You just need to accept your body's problem. You don't have to care about the gazes of others. Their mouths belong to them, so just let them speak freely. If you always care about how people look at you, won't you be tired to death?" 2. 1 means royal prince. 2. Mickey, I agree. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 20, 100-Year-Old Medicine. Chapter 20, 100-Year-Old Medicine. A pair of pure eyes stared unblinkingly at Ru Yue. Yi Wuchen didn't move at all, as though thinking about what had been said. His eyes looked really innocent and were without malice. "Also, you're not a fool." Ru Yue placed her hand on Yi Wuchen's shoulder and said seriously, "You just have a childlike mind that hasn't bloomed yet. On the contrary, your uncles and brothers won't have as pure a spirit as you." Even though Ru Yue accepted the imperial order out of convenience, since this person was her fiancé, she wouldn't allow anyone talk about him no matter how terrible he was. "Elder sister, are you a celestial maiden?" Yi Wuchen blinked his bright large eyes. With a candid smile on his handsome face, he continued, "You must be an elder sister celestial maiden that was dispatched by my father and mother and sent to me." "Don't call me elder sister." Ru Yue viciously glared at him. "I remember that the Ghost King's age is 19. I'm only 14 now. You're a whole 5 years older than me, so stop calling me elder sister. Can I call you my wife since those people said that you were my wife?" "No." Yi Wuchen's eyes fogged up with tears from grief. He looked pitifully at Ru Yue. Unreasonably, Ru Yue's heart softened. "Up to you." "Really?" Yi Wuchen excitedly smiled. With a faintly misty gaze brimming with innocence and enticement, he declared, "I'll call you my wife from now on." Upon saying that, he leaned his body forward to place a kiss at the corner of Ru Yue's lips. Hon. Ru Yue's mind was instantly stunned at that moment as she looked at the handsome face that had neared her. Her face turned completely red, including her ears. "My first kiss has been stolen by a little kid?" Even though Yi Wuchen had the physique of a 19-year-old, his mind had stagnated for the past dozen years ago ever since the murder of King Nanan and his imperial consort. To her, he was still a child that had yet to grow up. Facing such a person lacking a matured mind, she essentially hadn't put up any defenses against him. "Yi Wuchen, what do you think you're doing?" Ru Yue pushed the handsome young man in front of her away. Slightly angered, she asked, "Do you know what you have done?" Yi Wuchen's eyes expressed a feeling of wrongness. My father calls my mother his wife, and I saw them do that each day. My wife, did I do something wrong? Please don't be angry. If you really dislike it, then I'll stop doing that. The young man's voice was pure and without taint. Mysteriously, the anger in Ru Yue's heart was appeased. I'm not angry, I was just shocked. Ru Yue took in a deep breath. Yi Wuchen, do you know how to leave the palace? Let's head out now. Initially, she wanted to ask Ru Yue why she'd helped her, but seeing the circumstances today, it would be impossible. Forget it, this matter could be asked next time. After leaving the palace, Ru Yue went to a medicinal shop in the Phoenix City. It was about midday, so there weren't many people at the moment. There was only a shopkeeper that was dozing off from boredom. I've come to sell. Hearing a calm voice above his head, the shopkeeper raised his head and stretched before lazily looking at the young girl before him. I don't know what this lady plans to sell. Coming here, of course it's to sell medicinal plants. Ru Yue took out the handkerchief in her embrace and tossed it to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper mindlessly opened the handkerchief. Once he saw the medicinal plant enveloped by the handkerchief, however, his body shuddered and the drowsiness left him as he exclaimed in amazement, This is a 100-year-old medicinal plant? 1. Mickey, it is sealed. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 21, Angered Crown Prince Jing. Chapter 21, Angered Crown Prince Jing. On the martial god continent, medicinal plants were ranked as 10-year-old, 50-year-old, 100-year-old, 1,000-year-old, and lastly the rumored 10,000-year-old medicinal plant. Since Ru Yue didn't originate from the martial god continent, she wasn't sure on the medicinal plant rankings. She had expected the medicine she'd picked from the floor the previous day to be at most 50 years old. Thus, this method of using energy to grow medicine not only reinvigorated it, it also extended its life by a fold to 100 years. Ru Yue was momentarily excited. If this were really the case, she held a great treasure in her hands. The shopkeeper caressed the medicinal plant in his hand as though it were his treasure. With bright eyes, he said, Lady, I can give you 100 gold coins for this medicinal plant. Gold coins was the measurement of money in the martial god continent. This was slightly different from Huaxia. Huaxia just used the weighing of gold as a measurement, but here they literally used gold and silver coins as money. The proper monetary system here was 1 silver coin equated to 100 copper coins and 100 silver coins equated to 1 gold coin. Ru Yue nodded as she glanced at the various medicines in the shop. Please help me choose 100 stalks of 50-year-old medicinal plants, disregarding the types. The shopkeeper looked curiously at her. Others came to buy medicinal plants tailored to what they needed, but was this girl great enough that she didn't care about the type? Since he was trying to make a business, however, he naturally wouldn't question his clients. All right, lady, please wait a moment. The shopkeeper carried the medicinal plants over after a short moment and presented them before Ru Yue. A 100 stalks of 50-year-old medicinal plants will cost you 50 gold coins. Even though the difference between a 50-year-old and 100-year-old was only by a fold, their prices were as wide as the heavens and earth. Moreover, if it were a 1,000-year-old medicinal plant, its value would be sky-high. With Ru Yue's current ability, however, it was impossible for her to manufacture a 1,000-year-old medicinal plant, as those kinds of medicinal plants required vast amounts of energy, which she couldn't provide. Taking the bag of medicinal plants from the shopkeeper, Ru Yue turned around and walked out. Have you heard? Yesterday, the royal family withdrew the trash's marriage order. Ha ha! Your information is outdated. It wasn't the royal family that withdrew the marriage. It was the Mu family's trash that announced in the throne room that she didn't want to marry Crown Prince Jing, nor any of the royal line. She also said that all the princes and royals were stud horses that were covered in germs. The most interesting point was that His Majesty didn't punish her. Everyone recalled the recent rumors and used it as a topic during the tea break after their meals in the restaurant. Nobody saw that in one of the rooms of the restaurant, a handsome man's face had ashened while his fists were tightly clenched. Hon! He stood up from his chair. With gritted teeth, he looked as though he wanted to viciously strangle that wretched girl to death. Stud horse? She actually dared to call me a dirty stud horse. Even though I loved Ting Er, I already have 2 concubines in my courtyard. But isn't this normal? Which man will choose to only have one woman in his life? Compared to 9th Royal Uncle Yi Hua, who needed to use a brothel for his relief, I'm already on the better side. Excluding the fool that didn't know anything, who was that old and didn't already have a few women? Ru Yue called me a what? A stud horse? Royal grandfather didn't make a move on her due to the reputation of the Mu family. But I definitely won't let her go. I must kill her. Yi Tianfeng gnashed his teeth in hatred. If Ru Yue was before him, she would definitely be shredded into countless pieces. Actually, it wasn't because the Emperor of Ziyu looked up to the Mu family, it was because Ru Yue was an unloved trash. With his prestige as an emperor, however, he couldn't say that. Moreover, Ru Yue had been constantly tempting him at that moment. Even though he was already too old and didn't have much energy, his heart would still flare up from those instigation. He just wanted to dismiss the crowd and enjoy a solitary time with his beloved women. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 22, Green Pill. Chapter 22, Green Pill. Phone Air. Tian Yuan frowned as most things about his disciple was great, but his temperament still wasn't sufficiently stable. Yi Tianfeng then remembered that his master was still here, so he hastily suppressed the anger in his heart. Master, your disciple was previously too angry, so it doesn't matter. But with that temper, it will be hard for you to shoulder great matters. You should learn from the rest. Tian Yuan sighed. That's right, a peerless genius was recently discovered. It was a talent that had roused Grandmaster Wu Yu's heart and made him want to recruit a disciple. Astonishment was seen in Yi Tianfeng's eyes. He had been in the King-1 sect for about a dozen years already, so how could he not understand the temperament of Grandmaster Wu Yu? That old man's sight was incredibly high, and his gaze was vicious and fierce. He initially wanted to be taken under his wing, but he was rejected right on the spot. With his position in the King-1 sect, the disciple he recruited would definitely have a high status in the sect. Who was that talent that had moved Grandmaster Wu Yu's heart and even made him recruit a disciple? He was really curious as to how that person could enter the high-sighted eyes of Grandmaster Wu Yu. It's a young teenage girl. Tian Yuan smiled. We still don't know her name and identity. I'm not telling you this so you can help me search for her. You're a disciple of the King-1 sect after all, so if your movements are too obvious, it will attract attention from the other sections. Moreover, Grandmaster Wu Yu had already said that this matter cannot be made known to anyone. My purpose in telling you this is to make you understand that there is a peerless talent in the city. There may be some difficulties for that girl you love to obtain victory in a few months' time. Yi Tianfeng's heart sunk. Grandmaster Tian Yuan, even if Ting Er obtains second place, royal grandfather shouldn't care that much. Indeed. Grandmaster Tian Yuan stood. But haven't you thought that if she wants to enter King-1 sect, she must obtain first place so that she can be comparable to Crown Prince Jing's status and become a disciple of the King-1 sect? You really don't want her to get the top position? Don't worry, Master has some plans for that. His heart moved as Yi Tianfeng looked at Tian Yuan. Does Master mean? He. Tian Yuan stroked his beard and smiled. I remember that your girl is a third martial stage practitioner. I've a green pill that can be used to increase her power. Let's go. Master will go with you and meet that girl to see if she really is compatible with my disciple. A green pill could allow a martial practitioner under the 5th martial stage to break through a level, but it can only be used once in their life. Yi Tianfeng became excited. His Adam's apple moved up and down as he replied, "This disciple thanks Master for his kind intentions on Ting Er's behalf." In the Mu family, cheers filled the manor ever since Mu Qing had returned. It was unknown what Mu Ting Er and Mu Yue chatted about after they gathered around Mu Qing, but that something made them let out a trail of bell-like laughter. Suddenly, when a sharp-sighted daughter of the Mu family noticed Mu Ru Yue walking in from outside the manor, her lips lifted into a smile. I had long ago said that someone wouldn't be compatible with the Crown Prince, but that certain person didn't listen. Now it's great that she is going to marry a fool. Ha ha! I heard that the fool's mind isn't too good, and his appearance is so ugly that it's ghost-like, having literally scared a maid senseless. Hey everyone, let's take a guess. If a certain person were to wed, will she go crazy from looking at the Ghost King's appearance? Ugly appearance? Mu Ru Yue's brows raised as the image of an innocent and handsome face with innocent and enticing pure eyes entered her mind. Such a handsome person had become an ugly, ghost-like existence. This is indeed the might of rumors. Perhaps it was due to him rarely leaving the manor. Nobody helped dress him up, so after a long time, everyone thought he was so ugly that he couldn't meet with people. Who knew that his handsome appearance could instead make all the colors in the world fade? Mu Ru Yue ignored the girl, but who could have known that the girl didn't want to let her off? As she was heading to her room, a delicate figure blocked her path. Mu Ru Yue, are you deaf? Couldn't you hear that I was talking to you? Looking at the young girl with a snow-white face, Mu Ru Yue asked in astonishment, "You were talking to me?" You? Mu Yue's face reddened with fury. Just as she wanted to brandish a hand to hit Mu Ru Yue, she was restricted by Mu Ting Er. That's enough, Shui Er. She is still your blood sister. No matter what, you shouldn't raise your hand against her due to anger. If you do, I won't recognize you. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 23, Love is Selfishness. Chapter 23, Love is Selfishness. Did Mu Ting Er really want to help Mu Ru Yue? No. When Mu Yue was about to brandish her hand at Mu Ru Yue, she saw that 2 people had come from outside. These 2 were her lover Yi Tianfeng and an elder with an immortal bone. Seeing Yi Tianfeng's respectful appearance, she had already guessed that elder's identity. Elder's sister Ting Er. Mu Yue had tears in her eyes from feeling wronged. Elder's sister Ting Er, you actually scolded me for that trash and threatened me? What's so good about that trash? No matter how well you've treated her, she didn't show you any respect, and just kept scolding you, saying that you're just an adopted daughter and aren't compatible with the Mu family. Shui Er, no matter what, we are a family. A family should be harmonious. You should raise your hands against outsiders instead. Mu Ting Er knitted her brows, obviously unhappy with what Mu Yue had said. Moreover, what she says is correct. I'm just an adopted daughter that doesn't have the bloodline of the Mu family. Mu Ru Yue had just crossed her arms, watching the good show since the start of the exchange. Mu Ting Er really knew how to act, so it satisfied her mood as she watched the show. But Mu Ru Yue's eyes slightly narrowed. She had ignored their countless provocations since she hadn't cared about them. But even if she didn't care, it didn't mean she would tolerate it. I think you have thought wrongly on a matter. For a man like Yi Tianfeng, even if he was sent before me, I won't even give him a glance. Moreover, father also heard what I said in the throne room. It wasn't the royal family that withdrew the marriage. It was I, Mu Ru Yue, that didn't want to marry a man that is filled with germs. So Mu Ting Er, congratulations. You have picked up rubbish that I didn't want. I heard in the manor, there are 2 beautiful concubines and that it might even increase. By that time, you will be filled with germs. Oh. That's right, I also don't know if Yi Tianfeng has a habit of having two girls attend to him at once. I am really anticipating your expression when you see your husband rolling in bed with two other girls. Swish. Mu Ting Er's expression turned deathly white as her delicate body swayed. It was as though she was a sail caught in the wind. She loved Yi Tianfeng with all her heart, so when she thought of her beloved man doing those kinds of things with other girls, she felt an intense pain inside. It made her want to die immediately. 1. If she were to see those kinds of scenes in the future, she really didn't know if she would have the courage to live on. Mu Qing's expression changed drastically, and he wanted to flare up. Before he could open his mouth, a holler was heard behind Ru Yue, expressing unsuppressed fury. Ru Yue, what are you saying? As Yi Tianfeng said that, he already embraced Mu Ting Er's delicate body. With deep feelings in his eyes, he asked, Ting Er, don't listen to her gibble. How can I have that kind of habit? Your Highness. Mu Ting Er tightly held onto Yi Tianfeng's hand. With tears in her eyes, she asked, will you let other girls enter the manor in the future and do those kinds of activities with them? Will they be pregnant with your child? Yi Tianfeng was stunned. He pursed his lips, at a loss of what to say to her. Gradually, the hope in Mu Ting Er's eyes dimmed as tears slowly flowed down her lovable face. He always said that he loved me, but when loving me, he still lay with other girls. Is this what love is? Love should be more selfish. I don't want to share my beloved man willingly. The notion of him enjoying himself with other girls made her feel a pain that caused her to want to die. It was like countless blades were piercing her body. Ting Er, don't worry. I'll definitely treat you well for the rest of our lives. Yi Tianfeng tightly embraced the lovable body as he said with an aching heart, you will be the most beloved woman in my life. Just treat her well for the rest of her life? But what she wanted was to be his only woman. 1. Mickey, why don't you meanie? GJMRY. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 24, Good Nephew, let me hear you call me Aunt. Chapter 24, Good Nephew, let me hear you call me Aunt. Ru Yue. Yi Tianfeng looked furiously at Ru Yue as he shouted, who let you to say those kinds of words to Ting Er? Even if you're jealous, you shouldn't hurt a weak girl. Ting Er isn't you, she's so delicate that she wouldn't be able to withstand your harsh words. Immediately apologize to Ting Er. Jealous? Ru Yue laughed, shooting a gaze of mockery at Yi Tianfeng. Who am I jealous of? Mu Ting Er? Can it be jealous for you? What I said in the throne room was the truth. I, Ru Yue, am unwilling to marry stud horses during my lifetime. My husband must only have me as his woman for all his life. Which of my expectations have you reached? Even if I was blind, I wouldn't fall for you. The young girl's piercing gaze made Yi Tianfeng's expression change. Even though he had heard the rumors, he couldn't believe that the girl who loved him to the bones would say such words. But now, standing in front of him was really that young girl, and she no longer had any sentiments in her gaze. Her eyes didn't have the slightest trace of love. It was just mockery and another emotion he couldn't believe, disgust. Yi Tianfeng was clueless. Why is it that when I meet with Ru Yue's disdainful gaze, my heart feel uncomfortable? When has she changed? Was it that scene she'd witnessed that day that had completely killed her heart? It'll be better this way. It makes me feel much more comfortable when compared to seeing her starry-eyed and infatuated gaze. Yi Tianfeng ignored the unhappiness in his heart as he looked coldly at Ru Yue. Ru Yue immediately apologized to Ting Er. Hearing his words, Ru Yue wanted to laugh. So naturally, she did. Yi Tianfeng, what identity are you using to order me? Are you ordering me by your Crown Prince Jing status? If I remembered correctly, Crown Prince Jing is the nephew to the Ghost King. Even though I have yet to wed into Ghost King Manor, I already have a title. According to seniority, I'm your aunt. So, good nephew, let me hear you call me auntie. Yi Tianfeng's complexion turned from green to white, back to green, and then white again, changing constantly. Ru Yue chuckled lightly. Her eyes were filled with a frostiness that couldn't be dissolved. Good nephew, I'll wait for the day where you serve me tea. Tossing those words, Ru Yue didn't care about the Yi Tianfeng that had an ashen complexion. She slowly faded from the crowd's sight. Her lack of rebellion these past days was due to her not wanting to speak with these people. But because some still thought she was easy to bully, today, she wanted to let them understand that she, Ru Yue, wasn't someone who would endure being bullied. Father and your highness, look at that girl. Mu Yue was so angry that she almost jumped. Even commoners wouldn't have only one girl in their life. She is a raving lunatic. Suddenly, she seemed to have remembered her spoken words as she immediately covered her mouth, looking sheepishly at Mu Ting Er. Elder sister Ting Er, I'm fine. Mu Ting Er shook her head as she gradually suppressed the bitterness in her heart. What you said is correct. Your Highness, I don't blame you. Who in this world is able to just have a single woman in his life? Such a matter would really be a lunatic's dream. After saying that, she seemed to be muttering to herself as tears once again flowed from her eyes. Your Highness, if you have Ting Er in your heart, Ting Er will be satisfied. Her words gave Yi Tianfeng heartache as he tightened his hold on the body in his embrace. Ting Er, don't worry. I will definitely treat you well my entire life. I promise. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 25, Mu Qing's Surprise. Chapter 25, Mu Qing's Surprise. Cough. Cough. Mu Qing coughed, interrupting the flirting couple. Your Highness, may I ask who this is? Yi Tianfeng came back to reality. Previously, he had been consoling Mu Ting Er and forgotten about his master. Thinking that he had actually forgotten about his master's existence, he expressed guilt. Mu family's head in Ting Er, this is my master, alchemist Grandmaster Tian Yuan of the Qingyan sect. It was like a strong blow that struck Mu Qing's head. Shortly afterward, he changed from being in a daze to expressing elation. He immediately went forth and, with a flattering smile on his face, greeted the guest. So, it's the Grandmaster honoring us of your arrival. I previously didn't know Grandmaster's identity. I plead for Grandmaster's forgiveness for any unsatisfactory actions. Tian Yuan arrogantly nodded as he shifted his gaze at Mu Ting Er, who still had a pale complexion. This is the girl that Feng Er had mentioned? She's not bad. Feng Er's eyesight has always been good. Hearing Tian Yuan's praises, Mu Ting Er's complexion slowly recovered as she bashfully leaned into Yi Tianfeng's embrace. I don't know who that girl from before was? Tian Yuan asked, frowning. That's my eldest daughter. Mu Qing hastily replied, her blocked meridians made it impossible for her to cultivate. Moreover, since no one had disciplined her since she was a child, she became crafty and unruly, developing a personality that looked down on everyone. Ting Er had often been bullied by her. Tian Yuan nodded. She's also your Mu family's daughter, but there's a heaven and earth difference between them. It seems that it was an intelligent decision to terminate the marriage between Feng Er and her. At this moment, how could Tian Yuan know that the trash he didn't put any thought into would actually be the peerless genius that Wu Yu had been secretly looking for? That's right, I've come today about a favor Feng Er asked of me. I've heard that your daughter is currently at the 3rd martial stage practitioner. Here is a human stage high-grade green pill in my hand. When used, she can break through to the 4th martial stage. What? Mu Qing was stunned. A human stage high-grade green pill? Did I hear that properly? Mu Ting Er also forgot about her previous pain as she stared dazedly at Tian Yuan. Tian Yuan enjoyed those revered gazes, his face displaying a light smile. With a flick of his finger, a pill flew towards Mu Ting Er. I hope that you won't disappoint me during the talent competition in a few months' time. Mu Ting Er shortly received the pill. One with her head lowered, her long eyelashes covered the complacency in her eyes. I will, Grandmaster Tian Yuan. I won't let you down. Ru Yue, even if you are the genuine young mistress of the Mu family, while I, Mu Ting Er, am the adopted girl, so what? What was the outcome? Your ex-fiancé is in love with me, and your father and sister protect me. Lastly, I have also been able to obtain a pill that Grandmaster Tian Yuan had manufactured. The human stage high-grade green pill is probably something someone like you wouldn't be able to touch. Moreover, all of this I have snatched from you. With a slight raise of her brows, Mu Ting Er kept her head lowered, so nobody could notice the viciousness in her eyes. Just when Ru Yue entered her room, the sunlight before her was blocked by a black figure. Yan Jin raised his sword-like brows. He looked at the young girl before him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Little girl, why have you come back so late? Ru Yue frowned as she glanced at him. Didn't I tell you not to casually return to human form? If you were found out, it wouldn't be good. He. Little girl, don't worry. With this senior's power, even if someone was near, they wouldn't be able to sense my presence.